If incels hate women, why do they care so much what women think of them? That's my subject on today's Fiamengo File. I'm Janice Fiamengo of the University of Ottawa. Many journalists have moved to pronounce on the reason why on April 23rd, 25-year-old Alek Minassian drove a van down Yonge Street sidewalks in Toronto, Canada, killing 10 people and wounding many more. We've been told it's misogyny. Alek Minassian reputedly posted to an online community that rages against women. An essay in the Canadian magazine The Walrus, while admitting that we actually know next to nothing about Minassian's motives, nonetheless used his murderous rampage to ask why there are so many angry young men out there. Quote, why is a viciously misogynist movement flourishing? The author gives a tautological response to her question-begging question, because we live in a misogynistic culture in which men, quote, believe that they should be able to do what they want to women, end quote. The author's main argument, like many other similar arguments that we've heard recently, is that the raging young men in the online communities that Minassian purportedly visited, that they can't stand to see women's achievements in the workplace and that they are furious over their own lack of sexual success with women. This is a predictably oversimplified and incomplete thesis. If we're going to take seriously the problem of young men angry enough to kill others and themselves, we should at least be honest about their reasons, keeping in mind, of course, that there are likely many issues at play. But let's take as a given that there is a significant number of men in our society who are very angry at women. And so let's start with the first reason that's offered in the Walrus article and elsewhere: men's anger at women's success. Yes, men are witnessing a transformation of the workplace and the public sphere generally as women demand and achieve 50% or more representation in many areas that were formerly majority male. And as women come into these formerly male spaces in academia, in large corporations, in government offices, even as commentators in the National Hockey League, they demand sweeping changes to the culture to make women feel comfortable. Whether the men feel comfortable is entirely irrelevant to them. And the fact is that women are not moving so visibly into many of these spheres because of outstanding talent. They're coming in by government and activist dictate through affirmative action measures to hire more women into the civil service, to get more women into STEM, to have more women on corporate boards, to have more female politicians, and so on. There's very little that's natural and certainly nothing gradual about what's been happening. It's been a forced phenomenon in which, in the name of equality, men have been deliberately, legally disadvantaged over the past 30 years, forced to watch often less qualified women hired and promoted ahead of them, while at the same time told that if they object to the clear injustice, they'll get a lecture on misogyny, if not a harassment charge that can result in their dismissal from their job. The author of the Walrus article mentions Marc Lépine, the killer of women at the Montreal Polytechnic, who explicitly claimed that he hated feminists for ruining his life before opening fire on female engineering students. It was said at the time that Lépine, who had applied to the engineering program and been turned down, it was said that he was angry that the school was actively seeking to raise the number of women in the discipline. I don't know if that's ever been confirmed, that there was a policy in favor of female engineering students, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised, as equity programs have been in place in academia for decades. Living under a system of overt, government-sanctioned injustice is not an excuse to kill women, of course. But if we claim to want to know what's going on, it's at least worth acknowledging that the festering resentment of some men has a real, not an imaginary source. Young men's embittered awareness that feminist activists and their political enablers created a problem of glaring injustice, and not only created it, but won't even acknowledge that it exists. That's not going to evaporate with further denials. The second big issue mentioned by the Walrus author is men's sexual frustration. And this is also a lot more legitimate than is generally acknowledged. There's probably always been a cohort of men who, for whatever reasons, have no access to women who are involuntarily celibate. Studies of human DNA have proved that only a very small percentage of the male population, actually much smaller than the female percentage, has managed to reproduce throughout human history. Male sexual frustration has probably always been an issue for societies, but perhaps never in quite the way it is in ours, where it is both deeply under-acknowledged and, when it is acknowledged, made a subject of scorn and ridicule. Feminist ideologues tell us that sex and gender are social constructs and that therefore men's sexual needs aren't real needs, but merely forms of misogyny masquerading as biology. Men's desire for sexual companionship is not only not recognized as legitimate, but is, even as a result of feminist activism, now profoundly stigmatized. Men are scolded publicly for, quote, objectifying women, or for harassing women, for being sexual predators, or for feeling entitled to sex, for wanting to control women's bodies, and so on. Even merely to look at a woman in a certain way, let alone to pursue her, to express sexual interest or attraction, is now potentially a firing offense or even a criminal matter. Men are lectured constantly at school, in the media, at university, in the workplace, about the toxicity of their sexuality in a way utterly unthinkable if it were done for women. The distress of such men, their loneliness, their despair, their self-loathing, their suicidal rage, this is a problem they know they can't even talk about. It's a problem they know can't be helped and that they'll get no sympathy for. And moreover, women who can't begin to imagine what such frustration feels like mock and despise them for it. I'm not trying to justify the actions of an Alek Minassian or to suggest that the women he killed in any way deserved what they got, but I am saying that men's anger has a real source. Because if you live your whole life feeling ridiculed and blamed for your sexual urges, and then on top of that, you're constantly told about how you should apologize for your supposed entitlement to women's bodies, which is the last thing you've ever had, and you hear over and over again that the problem we face today is male privilege, male advantage, male overconfidence, male indifference to women's issues, the old boys network, and so on and on. If you keep hearing that, it's not surprising that you're going to turn off in corrosive bitterness and despair. And to think that the answer is to keep on going in the direction we've been going, which means more unfair measures to advantage women over men and more lecturing of men about what misogynists they are, that's just pure foolishness. We already have an epidemic of men killing themselves. And we have a core of very angry young men who believe with some justification that nobody gives a damn about their problems. These men have lost motivation to contribute anything positive to a society that's made clear it doesn't care about them. We can keep on telling them that they're just too privileged, but they probably won't believe it.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please support us on Patreon. If even half of our subscribers gave us $1 per month, we'd be well on our way to creating more and better content. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Studio Brule.